Good afternoon, everyone. House Taxation Committee, the final House Taxation Committee meeting will be called to order. Only one person applauding? In that nature, before we do requests for bill introductions, get into our business for the day, I do want to take a moment to thank our staff, Eddie, Adam from Research and the Revisor's Office. You guys do amazing work keeping us all on track. And certainly Leah, our committee secretary, committee assistant, she does more work than you guys realize, keeping me on task and keeping everything organized, herding the cats. And so if you don't mind, I wouldn't, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. I'm going to put you on the spot, Leah. How long have you been the committee assistant for the tax committee? Seven years. All right. You do a fine job. Thank you. And committee, I do want to recognize all of you. We've put in a lot of hours of work, some of them after 5. My apologies for that. But I have motivation today for some reason to get us out before 5 o'clock. But I do want to thank you all for your time and your hard work. This is going to be a fine committee I look forward to serving with next year as well. But with that being said, let's get right into our business. And are there any requests for bill introductions? Seeing none, our item of business today is a hearing. No, I'm kidding. We are going to be working Senate Bill 169. We are going to pass over the revisor's explanation because it is my intent to immediately offer an amendment to gut the contents of 169 and insert the contents of House Bill 2457. So this time we will open it up for action on Senate Bill 169, and I will make a motion to gut the contents of 169 and insert the contents of House Bill 2457. Second from Representative Epley. Any discussion on the motion? If anyone was curious, Senate Bill 169 was the Senate's single rate tax plan at 4.75%. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. At this time, we're going to take a little bit of a pause, or actually, do you want me to I'll have the revisor review the contents of 2457 first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2457 will make changes to the income tax, privilege tax, sales tax, and property tax provisions of Kansas tax code under what the contents of 2457 as were just inserted into Senate Bill 169. Under the rates commencing for tax year 2024 for individuals, have a single rate of 4.95%. And when the excess of Kansas taxable income of $11,250 for married individuals filing joint returns, or $5,624 for all other individuals. Then commencing in tax year 2023 for corporations, the normal tax is decreased from 4% to 3%, and any potential decreases from prior Apex legislation would be discontinued, so those rates would be held firm indefinitely. For the Social Security, the provisions of House Bill 2109 were inserted, increasing the subtraction modification for Social Security income, and then after 2026, all income from Social Security would be subject to the subtraction modification. Under the Kansas standard deduction, commencing in tax year 2023, the standard deduction of individuals was raised $500 from $3,500 to $4,000. Then commencing in tax year 2024, all of the standard deductions would be increased by a cost of living adjustment and thereafter. For the income tax credit for purchases of food would be discontinued commencing in tax year 2023. Moving on to the privilege tax for national banking associations and state banks is decreased for the normal tax from 2.25% to 1.625%, commencing in tax year 2023. And then the privilege tax for trust companies, savings and loans would be decreased from the normal tax of 2.25% to 1.61%, commencing in tax year 2023. Under the sales tax revisions, the state rate of sales and compensating use tax for sales of food and food ingredients, which is currently set at 4%, would be decreased to 0% commencing July 1 of 2023. And the percentage change in revenue distribution between the for receipts of sales and use tax would be increased from what is currently 17% to 18%, and that would commence July 1 of 2023 also. Then lastly, under the single property tax provision, the current $40,000 exemption from the 20 mills for residential property would be increased to $65,000 for tax year 2023, and then it would continue to increase thereafter, which is currently established by law.
Thank you, committee. Are there any questions for the advisor? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't think I heard this in there, but I just want to double check. So this does not reduce or eliminate local food sales taxes.
That is correct. The 0% is only on the statewide
We're on
rate.
the state, so the locals would be able to continue to tax at the rate they're currently taxing.
That is correct, and it also does not change the definition of food from what we
Okay.
have current statute.
All right, thank you.
Representative Alcala.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to comment on that question because I get that question a lot when I'm out on the streets. What people don't realize is that part of a lot of funding sources for municipalities, and if they eliminate that tax, what's going to happen is we'll end up seeing some type of property tax increase because we're not going to see any decreased spending in local government. So that's probably going to be there for a long time. So property tax, a little bit of food sales tax.
Any further questions for the advisor? Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to verify on the sales tax reduction on the highway KDOT piece that we're making them whole on that. Is that correct with this?
Yes, I do believe it accelerates that move from 17% to 18%, also to July 1st. I'll look to the advisor if that's incorrect, but yes, it does move up that. Do you have an interest in transportation?
None at all. I'm just curious. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
We've
Chairman.
got somebody else on this committee that has a pretty good interest.
I think so.
You want to split job?
Further questions on the bill? Seeing none, before we open it up for discussion and amendments, Eddie has done some work on the total fiscal note. We are going to be trying to do kind of a real-time estimate as we have amendments. As I said during the hearing, the fiscal note on the original bill is much higher than I was intending. I've been speaking with the chairman of appropriations since December, trying to ask him, what's our budget for tax cuts? How much revenue reduction can we sustain as we look at this year, next year, and even 4 or 5 years out? The number he was giving me was $500 million. That hasn't changed. My number, I'll be honest, personally, I'm closer to maybe the 425 or 450, but I'm a budget guy, but I don't serve on appropriations. So if the chairman of that committee tells me 500 million, I want to keep it certainly below that, just to not throw the budget out of whack with whatever he has planned. So that's kind of my target number. We've got 23 people on the committee. There might be 23 different numbers. I'll leave each of you to determine what you feel is a sustainable number for revenue reduction, and we will go from there. But I'll turn it over to Eddie. He will explain a little bit about the work that we've done on this fiscal note. And also, assuming the 500 million would also include bills that we've already passed out of this committee. If they become law, that becomes total part of the total aggregate amount that we are cutting revenue. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Penner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What's on the screen here and at the end of the committee, my meeting today, my plan is to kind of PDF this and get it out to the committee based upon action at the end so that you can all review it, is a table. And this table is kind of broken up into 3 parts. The first part is the bills that have passed the House itself. The second part is the bills that have passed this committee and currently sit on House General Orders. And the third part is the bill that you're working on today. So I'll walk through the first two parts really quickly, and then spend quite a bit more time on the latter part. You can see that, and the other thing I should note is that this table only includes bills that have specific fiscal impacts for the state. And so bills that have either no impact or a local only impact or a negligible or indeterminate impact are not displayed on this list. If you're seeing this list and thinking to yourselves, well, why isn't my bill up there? That very well might be why. So this first top section here is bills that have actually passed to the House in terms of bills with a state fiscal impact. You can see that there are 3 of those that have passed the House to date, and those sum to having an state general fund impact of kind of $15 to $17 million per year. The state all fund impact is in between $18 and $19 million per year. That's the other thing that I want to be clear on. These first 3 columns here are general fund, and the latter 3 columns are all funds. Generally speaking, the 4 funds that might be in play as it relates to all funds, other than the state general fund, are the state highway fund, the 2 state building funds, and the state school district finance fund. Those are the ones that are at issue with bills that we've looked at this year. The next section is bills that have passed out of this committee and are currently on House General Orders. You can see it looks like there are 6 of these that have state fiscal impacts. And you can see those state fiscal impacts in terms of the general fund are between $22 and $23 million per year. In terms of the all fund amount, it's between $30.8 and $32.1 million per year. And so that brings us to kind of a static, for purposes of today's meeting, total for the committee bills to date, the subtotal committee bills of between $37 and $39.1 million general fund, and $49.4 and $51.0 million all fund. That's kind of the tax work that you all have done this year to date. And so that brings us down to the bill that you're looking at today. This is the 2457 information, and I've kind of split it out by individual provision here. I probably didn't order these in the exact easiest to read order, unfortunately, but I got privilege tax rate reductions first, individual, the single bracket plan, the corporate income tax rate reductions, the Social Security phase out provisions, the standard deduction increase and cost of living adjustments, the food sales tax credit repeal acceleration, the food sales tax to 0% acceleration, and the homestead exemption provision to $65,000. You can see here that the kind of general fund number for this bill is 580, 697, and 629. The all funds implications are 642, 752, and 692. And so that brings kind of the grand total, which is just the combination of the previous committee bills and this bill, to 617, 736, and 668 for the general fund, 691, 802, and 743 for all funds. And the only other thing that I want to clarify on this before I would either stand for questions or just hand it back to the committee is that while some of the property tax provisions show up as not having a general fund impact, that is true for receipt purposes only. However, to the extent that any of these provisions trigger a reduction in receipts for the state school district finance fund, that automatically, formulaically, increases state general fund expenditures by virtue of the school finance formula. And so that there is that kind of limited misleading aspect to this table, but the unfortunate reality is that there's not a very easy way to capture that without this table getting really complicated. So just keep that in mind as you work through this. And with that, I'd stand for whatever questions you may have, or just hand it back off.
Yeah, Ed, if you want to leave that up for just a second, your spreadsheet does look a little bit different than mine because I'm also trying to track each one of those line items. And mine basically takes the there at the bottom on the left-hand side where it says House Bill 2457 subtotal at 579 for fiscal year 24, 696 in fiscal year 25, and 629.3 in fiscal year 26. I think that's all I've done is I've added in the that homestead exemption piece for about $55 to $60 million across the years. But because you're right, if we pull that out, it's our obligation to backfill that with state general fund dollars. So I don't see any glazed over eyes. So you did a much quicker job than no. No, JG did a great job yesterday, and I really thank him for his work with the committee. We went through a lot of information in a relatively short amount of time. But committee, are there any questions on the fiscal impact? Eddie will be kind of updating this as we go through amendments. If you have a request to look at this at any time, just let us know. Representative Francis.
So by the way, my eyes were glazing over and I was thinking about something when that conversation came up about unintended consequences of some of these tax cuts. So did I understand that right? That the homestead exemption to 65,000 will create a spending cost to the state of somewhere around 55 million as we try to backfill for the education spending?
Yes, that is correct. The all funds amount that you can see over here to the right, with the homestead provision, the exact amount that you see in that line is the required increased state general fund expenditure if the revenues of the 20 mil statewide school finance levy are reduced by virtue of any homestead exemption increase.
So when I understand that a portion of that is probably the building fund. Is a portion of that the building fund also?
For most property tax changes, it would be. However, the 20 mil exemption, the homestead exemption, only applies to the school finance levy, and so for this particular property tax provision, it is only school finance, no building funds.
So the net effect is we could actually add about 55 to 60 million on our grand total of all bills currently.
Yes.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eddie, would you mind scrolling back up to the middle section? So my question is, what's going to happen with those 6 bills? What are the plans?
That's up to the majority leadership, which bills they bring up above the line. But those are potentially, I wanted to include those because those are potentially bills that will move forward or could move forward. So we need to include them in the total.
Is there any chance that any of these will get bundled?
That's speculation, I think. Yeah, anything happens in conference committee, as we've proven, unfortunately.
Okay, so those bills are all still alive?
Certainly.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, I will now open it up for discussion or amendments on House, what is now, let's see, this would be now House substitute for Senate Bill 169, or it will be once we get to the end. Okay. Representative Sawyer.
I have an amendment, Mr. Chairman. Adam, do you guys have the Social Security? This amendment will cut that fiscal net a little bit. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. What this amendment does is it takes the Social Security provisions that are in the bill and changes it back to the original 2109. So what it does, the first $75,000 of Social Security income is totally exempt. Then we phase it out between 75 and 100,000, and then those over 100,000, those that make it over 100,000 continue to pay state income tax on Social Security. This will cut the fiscal round numbers. I guess Eddie can give us exact numbers, but basically 20 million the first year, 40 million the second, 60 the third, 80, and then eventually about 100 million a year after that.
Looks like everyone has had a chance to receive a copy of that. Before we proceed, do we have a second on the Sawyer amendment? Representative Clayton. Do you want to further explain, or do you want Eddie to go over the
Eddie, go over that.
numbers?
That's pretty basic.
Okay. We'll be patient. We're not in any hurry.
Yeah, as you can see in these highlighted cells, this changes the impact to the Social Security as HB 2109 as introduced to -20, -16, and -16.1. I do have a slight error in my all funds numbers there. They should be identical to the general fund numbers there. So the selected cells here are the ones at issue in this amendment, and this is what the table would look like were this amendment to be adopted by the committee.
I think if I remember correctly, in the out years, the total exemption on Social Security is roughly around 115, 120 total.
It is in that range, and that is one thing that I probably should have noted, is that while some of these provisions do tend to grow pretty steadily for years beyond fiscal 26, the Social Security one in the bill as it stands currently does have one more big jump up in fiscal 27 before it then turns into a more steady growth. And obviously the standard deduction cost of living adjustment increase, that is a steadier increase into the indefinite future. So.
Okay. Representative Sawyer, do you want to further explain, or ready for questions?
Yeah, as he put, once this gets fully implemented, this will save about $100 million a year over the underlying bill.
Okay.
Once this is fully implemented, it'll be about $100 million less per year than the bill as it stands right now.
Okay. For question, Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. So what you're saying is this saves $100 million other than just taking Social Security completely. Income tax totally is the savings on this. Is that it? Okay.
Questions on the Sawyer amendment? Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I got it right. So it's just moving the 75 over to 100,000, right? So it's just expand. Okay. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
No, go. Representative Sawyer.
It's right now we have a cliff, right? So you're at 75,000. You don't pay anything. 75,001, you pay the whole thing. This then between 75 and 100, it gets rid of the cliff. So, all right. Okay.
Theoretically, if you're halfway between 75,000 and 100,000, that's 50%. You'd pay income tax on 50% of your Social Security benefits, or wherever you landed in that range. We're trying to eliminate the original bill was trying to eliminate that cliff. But Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So and maybe it's changed since, but as I'm looking at the fiscal note for, let me make sure I got the right number here, 2457, then it also talks about in out years, it was going to continue to move downwards. So does this one stop at the 100? This one talks about it going to 125, 175, 275 before going away in 2026. So that's what
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's what the current bill does. My amendment would change that to just 100,000. Stops at 100. Yep.
Representative Sanders, and then
And
Corbett.
so let me, again, get this straight in my head. So these numbers were what we started out with originally. And then I think, Chairman, if I recall, you offered these new numbers that are currently in the bill, and we passed that. And now what you're wanting to do, Representative, is return to the original numbers.
The original numbers on 2109, not the original numbers on 169. You understand? This is the original 2109 as it was introduced. We worked the bill in committee and changed it to what's in the bill now.
Right.
This takes us back to the original 2109, which is basically $16 million a year once it's
Thank you.
fully implemented.
Representative Corbett.
Just kind of going over this, we started out trying to make promises, again, we can't keep, whether it's zero sales tax on food or elimination of the income tax on Social Security. It seems like we just can't seem to, I'm not going to support this, but it seems like with all the money that we have in the reserves plus the 34 billion we were crashed on to begin with, it's kind of sad to start beating up the retirees, I think, over this. I mean, that's just my thought.
Representative Helgerson.
Tom, let me make sure it was the original governor's plan was to move the cliff, to change the cliff. The cliff meaning that those individuals that were over 100,000,
Over 75,000.
over 75,000 would still pay taxes on that amount over 100,000 now under the current one, but at whatever the rate is. The amount below 100,000 is discounted. Is that correct, or eliminated?
It's a linear progression, so that like under the current law, if you're at 75,001, you pay 100% of state tax on your Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
Now you'd pay a little less. You would pay almost none at 70,001. You would pay maybe 1%. Basically, yeah. So it just moves up until you get to 100,000, and then you would be paying Social Security again, paying state income tax on your Social Security again. So it takes the cliff away and puts a progression in there between 75 and 100.
Okay. The goal was, or at least not only was philosophically to put us at the point in comparison with other states on Social Security. That was, I think we heard, was it 20 or 30 states have eliminated Social Security taxes? Is that, I don't remember how many, but
I believe the number was 36.
it's 36. So the goal with the proposal that we had was to move us to that, in that category for tax benefit, but also for just to compare with other states that we had no tax on Social Security. And then the final point I want to make is just to be sure, you're saying that your change saves us $100 million ballpark.
Yes, once the other one's implemented, it's 119 or something $1 million a year. This is 16 million a year. So basically $100 million savings each year.
Okay, you're right. Annually, it's $100 million savings.
Yep.
Okay.
Representative Epley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think all of us are kind of thinking out loud here together. And Chairman, and thank you for letting me speak on this issue. If you're trying to get to a $500 million threshold, this is one way of doing it, but there are other ways that the committee could consider. And so this is just one method as we consider this amendment today. So I just want the committee to be advised of that. There's other ways to get closer to that 500 million goal that you've set.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. And I'm going to also say that we probably can't do it all in one chunk. We will probably have to take several bites at this to get that fiscal number down where we need to be. I know when we discussed the phase out on 2109, I proposed that amendment to kind of phase it out over a period of 4 years. To me, this is I'd call this a friendly amendment because we are trying to cut that package, total package price to the state. However, this is always something, if we come back next year or the year after and the economy is doing good, we don't have to worry about a recession. Banks are doing well. Things are looking good. Maybe we can take another look at this then. But to me, I think this is a reasonable approach to trying to reduce that overall fiscal note. But are there any further questions or discussion? Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you refresh my memory on what that starting number was before Eddie had changed that? I didn't write that down, and I kind of want that for a reference point here.
Okay.
On the all funds.
And I will reiterate, it's important to look at each fiscal year, 24, 25, and 26, because there's some things that, like, I'm trying to think which one, like the food sales tax reduction has a big impact in that first fiscal year 24, but then it's zero in fiscal 26. So each one of these provisions might have a different impact. So we have to look at those 3 years kind of in aggregate, as opposed to just 1 year.
So this is the bill as it stands right now, with the Social Security kind of multi-year phase out. I'm not sure exactly which of the all funds numbers were you wanting to. I mean, they 642, 752, and 692 were the three for this bill in particular. If that's what you're after. All right, and then I'll just go ahead and paste in really quickly. That is what it looks like with this change.
Representative Kessler, you had the floor. Are you
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That answered my question. Thank
okay? Representative Helgerson.
Yeah. Well, is it also possible then, if we wanted to eliminate all the tax on Social Security, we could rob from the bank of ks.gov?
Is there a substitute motion or Representative Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, not to put you on the spot or anything, but so you had offered the changes that where we're at now, but now given the circumstance that we're in, you're viewing this as friendly.
Absolutely. And the reason that I bundled this package together and created what we have today in House Bill 2457 is because this is exactly what happens when we run every single measure through on its own merit. These things get large because we think when we're discussing them, they're a great idea, and they are good ideas. I'm not saying that phasing out Social Security income tax is a bad idea, but when we put all these things together, the total price tag is way too much. So if we build a package, we can take a look at how much the revenue reduction is. And this, to me, this is one of those things that makes sense to trim down and see if we can get closer to that 500 or below 500. Further discussion, committee? Seeing none, Representative Sawyer, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got to point out, when I was talking about 100 million, you're talking about fiscal year 28. I mean, it's only, if you look at that chart, it's saving us maybe about 20 million the first year, 38 million the second, maybe 50. We're about halfway there by 2026. So even we pass this amendment, we have to do a lot more to get us under our target. But this is one step.
Okay.
I move my amendment.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor of the Sawyer amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. We are back on the bill. Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I thought the thing that we got yesterday from JG, I mean, it's one of those things we always have to keep our mind on. And I want to remind everybody that the document that he handed out, no matter which scenario you think is going to happen, it was optimistic. You know, there's a lot of us in here that are on appropriations, and all of you guys are on tax. And every one of these scenarios going forward had no new spending at all, had no new tax cuts, had no new tax credits, had no new tax exemptions. And so whenever you look at these numbers, they're optimistic, regardless of what you think the scenario will be. And I know my friend from Wichita reminds me many times about some of the pitfalls of some of the things that we do in some of our debates in appropriations. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, if we have no recession and we come up with a package of $500 million in tax cuts, we are still, expenditures will be above our receipts by an estimated $229 million in 2027. So, you know, I think it behooves all of us to be conservative. Well, maybe that's not the right word. To be conscious of some of those fiscal things that can happen to us. I know a lot of us in this room are concerned about a possible recession. You know, Federal Reserve has raised rates from practically zero to, I think it was 5% yesterday. And we're going to continue to see that, or we're going to see inflation. Who knows what? So with that, I have an amendment. Eddie or Adam, can you hand it out? And then I think there's also a sheet that kind of shows how this amendment would affect people in different tax brackets. What this amendment does
If you
is,
want to hold off just a second, we'll make sure we get that
Sure.
in everybody's hands first.
yeah. That's from. So what this amendment does, I guess I'll wait for the chairman to get back in his chair. We had, when the conferees talked about it, about the flat tax, one of the things that they said more than once was the rate wasn't quite as important as the concept of the flat tax. And, we also had some conversations later on about triggers and growth triggers and things like this. What this does is, in the original bill, the flat tax is set at 4.95%. This changes that rate to 5.25%. And then to make sure nobody gets a tax increase, we have to raise the amount where the taxable income starts to $12,300 for a married individual and $6,150 for a single individual. And so what that means in reality is if you're a single filer under this amendment, you currently, under current law, you start paying taxes at $8,250. Under this one, you don't start to pay taxes until $12,400. If we look at somebody that's married with 2 kids, current law, you start to pay income taxes at $22,000. Under this amendment, your income tax doesn't start until $29,300. And the entire purpose of that is to make sure that nobody at any income level gets a tax increase. And if you look at this sheet that was handed out, you can get a rough idea of how each of the income brackets, how much they can hypothetically save under this procedure. And with that, I'll make my motion.
Before we get into discussion, is there a second? Representative Epley with the second. So Representative Francis, I just want to make sure, looking at the chart of numbers that you've passed out, the second red column from the right, where you've got, that's as it stands at the 4.95% rate. And then that last column is the 5.25.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, committee, are there any questions on the Francis amendment? Representative Kessler?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Eddie, can we see the numbers on that?
Yes, let's go ahead and put those into the chart. Thank you.
Okay, this, as it shows right here, this is the bill as it stands right now. So it does include the change on Social Security, but nothing else. And I will paste these numbers in, and that is what it gets revised to with this change.
So we are roughly looking at 556 million for fiscal year 24, 514 million for fiscal year 25. I'm looking at the all funds, and 422.4 for fiscal 26.
Correct.
Representative Helgerson. He was just going to move a little bit so we can see the screens. I didn't know how this was going to work. I wanted Eddie to do something kind of real time so we could see how this was impacting rather than handing out 50 sheets of paper each time. Okay. Representative Turner for a question.
I thought I'd ask a question while we're reseating here, but so I just want to make sure I'm understanding this schedule right that was handed out. So for a married couple making a federal adjusted gross, I'm on the $100,000 line, they'd be saving $125 annual tax savings.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And again, this gets us on a flat rate program, and then we can look in the out years at maybe what a slider would or a trigger would work.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on this chart, which number are we trying to get to 500 million for this year or 24?
It's a little bit difficult. What matches with my numbers that I'm keeping track of on my spreadsheet are the three numbers on the right, the all funds totals. Right there, yes. Not the grand total of all bills. Well, yeah, the grand total of all bills is ultimately where we want to be below 500.
So even with this, we've still got over 100 million to go.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Committee, are there any further questions? Representative Sawyer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this amendment takes the 4.95 rate, raises it to 5 1/4, and then raises that the amount of money, the exclusion where you pay no tax, up to $12,300 for married and $6,150 for single. I just want to verify that's what we're doing.
Yes, that's my understanding. And then,
Okay.
that takes into account the standard deduction and exemptions and the threshold. And of course, I think we've also got another bill up there, don't we, that ties some of that inflation.
Another part of the very first amendment we did put the standard deduction automatically increases year with inflation.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. I personally hate the flat tax. I'll just say that flat out. I believe in a progressive income tax, and if I had my way, I was king. I would just add more brackets, raise the standard deduction, help people on the bottom end. Having said that, taking this package as a whole with the other pieces we have in here with the homestead property tax relief, increasing the standard deduction with inflation each year, and then this piece with the 12,300 exclusion up front. To me, this is an acceptable. As the bill is now, I can definitely support this amendment. I think it does some pretty good things. I have a chart. I ran some numbers on different income levels, just trying to try this out. And for example, a married couple at 35,000 with no kids, right now pay $698 in Kansas income tax. Under this bill, they would get a 24% reduction. They only pay $535. At $30,000, they get a 50% reduction. If you look at married with 2 kids, making $35,000, they'd get almost a 50% reduction. So I think this provides a lot of good relief on the bottom end. Does a lot what we want to do, and it brings our total fiscal note down a little bit. So I'm going to support this amendment.
Is there further discussion on the Francis amendment? Seeing none, Representative, you may close.
I close.
Committee, you've heard the motion by Representative Francis. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. At this time, I want to propose an amendment on the corporate and banking provision.
Yeah, I think so. You want to try that?
Technical difficulties, sorry. Okay, this one, I knew where we were going to kind of land, and we're still, in my mind, we're still over budget a little bit. So I'm trying to trim a little bit more off of our fiscal note. This takes the corporate and banking pieces that are the accelerated Apex provisions. I guess I'll back up and start from scratch here. With Apex, we have scheduled a 0.5% reduction for each Apex project that is approved and certified. We have one that has been certified at this point. We're anticipating another one that is not yet in place yet, and I'm aware of that. But I was a little disappointed, I guess, when we heard from the secretary that Commerce had not actually certified the project in time to have that reduction take effect in tax year 23. And the second project likely will not be, if it is, when it is certified, will not trigger that second 0.5% reduction in the corporate tax rate until 2025. So the original bill, I wanted to accelerate the full 1% reduction to tax year 2023. That did, by my spreadsheet, I think Eddie's matched that. That is a price tag of $124 million for tax year 24. And so what the amendment is going to do is it's going to let up on the accelerator a little bit and just accelerate them all to tax year 2024. So in essence, what we're doing is we're just accelerating that last 0.5%, assuming that the Integra project would take effect. I guess you could say that this is anticipating that, because if that second project would fall through, this amendment would go ahead and set that new rate at 6%. So I just want to be clear there. We are assuming that that second project, or if that project is denied, a third project or whatever else might be in the works at this point. But we did authorize 2 Apex projects, and that's what the bill reflects, or the amendment. At this point, before we get into discussion, I'll look for a second. Is there a second? Representative Clayton or Helgerson. 2 seconds. All in favor? No. Questions? Representative Kessler.
Can we see the numbers again?
Yep, Eddie's working on those. I'll let him. He's going to do some changes to the spreadsheet to try to make it a little simpler to read, but we can go ahead and take any questions or discussion on the amendment. Oh, Eddie said he's ready to go.
Okay, I've added one line item here, and this is one thing that I think there was some discussion on earlier about the fact that the homestead changes prompts an SGF expenditure increase. So I've added this line here immediately below grand total all bills. That is the SGF grand total plus the homestead implication. And because I think for at least some of you, that is the number that you have been kind of looking at most closely. So this is the bill as it stands right now, and I'll paste in the numbers with the amendment, and that is where you get as you can see, the 2 cells that were implicated with this amendment are these 2, and then also the all funds equivalent, because what this in essence does is just changes the exact same policy to being in tax year 24 as opposed to tax year 23.
I'll let everybody take a look at that and then take any further discussion. Is there any discussion, committee?
That's a good question.
Representative Turner?
Refresh me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Refresh me on we came up with a beginning target of what, 450? Is that what it was? I'm just curious.
On this bill, I was wanting to stay around 450 because I knew that the aggregate total that Eddie is now, that new line that he has added, that's kind of the total of this bill and all the other bills that we've passed out of committee, should they all become law. So my target for the overall package was around 500.
So does that middle year at 557?
Pardon?
But I'm seeing the middle 25 looks like it's at 557. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Does that cause you heartburn?
Does it cause me heartburn? Not really, because I'm looking at that third year, because by the third year, all of the provisions have been fully enacted. If that third year was 557, I would be more concerned. But as it stands right now, it looks like we're saving a little bit under 500 million in tax year or fiscal year 24. It's not a direct offset. If you average those two, you'd still be over 500. But by that third year in this projection at fiscal year 26, that's the number that I wanted to keep well under 5, because that's the year that, as it continues out, the standard deduction will grow a little bit faster, but food sales tax has been fully implemented. The corporate reduction has been fully implemented. That's if I had to pick one number that I was looking at to make my decision, that would be that fiscal year 26. all funds or the grand total.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So then if we add in this amendment, that basically gets us to where we need to be.
Very, very close. Yes. I would be comfortable if this amendment got on. I think this is within the parameters that the chairman of the Appropriations Committee gave me.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Further discussion, committee? Seeing none, I will close and move my amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We are back on the bill. Any further discussion or amendments? Seeing no further discussion, I will entertain a motion on. Oh, yes, thank you. While I was looking at this, we did have another conceptual amendment we needed to change. Looking at the enactment date, the bill currently reads upon publication in the statute books. That is traditionally understood as July 1st. However, we have a provision in this bill with the food sales tax piece that takes effect July 1st. I've confirmed with Department of Revenue that they would be okay with that. However, that could put us out of compliance with the streamlined sales tax agreement because they require a 30-day notice between, and I thank Kathleen and the Department of Revenue for sending me the language exactly, but their language says between the date of enactment and the effective date. So we have to have at least 30 days. So my amendment would be to make this effective upon publication in the Kansas Register. Just to move that date up, make sure we have plenty of time to implement. In a second from Representative Helgerson. Was that clear as mud? Some of the newer legislators, we can have two different enactment dates upon publication in the Kansas Register. That's the state newspaper. I don't know, usually that's within a few weeks of when the governor signs it, and then it becomes law a little bit quicker. If it's upon publication in the statute books, it is traditionally July 1st. So this will just make sure that we have Department of Revenue has plenty of time. We're in full compliance with the streamlined sales tax agreement. So, any discussion? If not, I'll move my motion. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Now, any further discussion on the bill? Thank you to Representative Sawyer for reminding me of that one. If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion on Senate, what is now House substitute for Senate Bill 169. Representative Hoheisel. Sorry.
You sure? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out House substitute for Senate Bill 169 favorably for passage. Is that amended or no? As amended.
As
after.
amended.
Yeah,
Yes.
as amended.
In a second, Representative Epley. Committee, you've heard the motion by Representative Hoheisel. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Does anybody want their vote recorded? Seeing none, that concludes our business on that. We also have hearing, or we're done with hearings. I'm not sure why I'm stuck on that. Okay, we had on the agenda to work House Bill 2465. This was the kind of the technical cleanup bill that we heard yesterday. Unless somebody wants a review, we just heard it yesterday. We can pass over the reviser's review on that. I would bring it up for discussion or amendment. Representative Helgerson.
I'll make a motion to pass it out favorably.
Representative, do you think that this would qualify as a consent calendar, or do you think it would be best to put it under the line?
My concern is that if on the third day, depending on time and when the tax committee is going to be joint tax committee, that could get pulled off on the third day, and then you may have some real problems getting it passed.
Okay. I
But
would
I'll
concur.
leave it whatever. I'll leave it whatever you like.
No, that's a very valid point. I would agree. So Representative Helgerson for the motion. Is there a second? Representative Sawyer, any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Committee, that concludes our business for the day. Is there any other items? Representative Burkamp?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I do have a bit of an unusual request. I would like to make a motion to reconsider House Bill 2136, which deals with eminent domain.
Okay, I will give everyone a moment to pull that up. On the S drive, it's House Bill 2136. Do you remember what date we heard that by chance? February 9th. Before we move back in, motion to reconsider. Representative Epley. Yeah, we'll turn to the revisor for an overview on House Bill 2136.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2136 would provide a Kansas income tax subtraction modification applicable for tax year 2021 and thereafter for compensation from amounts received as an appraiser's award or final judgment pursuant to the Eminent Domain Procedure Act, or payment from the sale of private property purchased by an authorized entity that would otherwise be subject to a taking under the Eminent Domain Procedure Act.
Do you want to further explain or to open it up for discussion?
I will open it up for discussion.
Okay. Before we move on, I want to double check. Do we need to vote on the motion to reconsider and then have a motion to work the bill, or does that automatically bring it up for consideration? All right. We will consider the motion to reconsider in the second as bringing the bill up on the table, so it is now open for discussion and amendment. Representative Epley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And at my own peril, with the fact that there's a basketball game in about an hour, I did want to have this revisited because as I vetted the concerns, and they were valid concerns over how much taxable income and the scope of the bill, I came up with an amendment that would narrow the focus of the bill down to basically things from the state government, not dealing with local municipalities, counties, or cities. And it would only deal with public utilities and with KDOT. And in that vein, it makes it a much more focused bill. The amount of hit on the SGF, if you want to look at that way, or the amount of money that would taxpayers might be as high as $500,000 as we looked at it. And legislative research was helpful to me in this vein. If you want them to explain very briefly, they could explain how we arrived at that. But when we focus the amendment to just public utilities and to KDOT, it basically maximum is $20 million worth of taxable income. And when you subtract basis points and you look at the highest tax rate, it might be as high as at most $1 million, but probably closer to about $500,000. And, you know, when you talk to my constituents, all three of them were Vietnam veterans, they felt like they'd fought hard for our country. They had done their thing to honor our country. And then we take their land from them. And then in addition to that, we levy state taxes on them for land they did not want to give up. And this basically is directed at public utilities and KDOT. And I think the amendment makes this a much better, more focused bill and lets us know exactly what the bite is. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll go ahead and distribute that. While we're waiting for that, do we have a second on the Epley amendment? Representative Hoheisel for a second. It looks like everyone has a copy. Representative Epley, do you want to further explain, or do you want Eddie to go over the numbers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it'd be more effective if Eddie went over the numbers. I've probably talked enough. Thank you.
Okay.
To try to get some information that might be helpful in conceptualizing what sort of exposure the state might have on this. At the request of the representative, we reached out to the Department of Transportation and also to the KCC regarding the amount of expenditures that might kind of be in play here. The KCC indicated that they don't actually track these expenditures for utilities. The Department of Transportation was able to provide us with their actual kind of right-of-way and easement acquisition expenditures in the last 3 years. Those ranged from between $3.5 to $4 million per year, up to right around $10.5 million per year, and the other year in that 3-year range was about $6 million. Not getting anything from the KCC, we did reach out directly to one particular utility, and that utility gave us some information, but that they wanted to make it as clear as possible that the information that they were providing really did not get to the heart of the issue, because it's impossible for them as a utility to get to the heart of the issue, since the actual tax calculation here involves not just the amount paid to the taxpayer for this occasion, but also what the taxpayer's their actual basis was for the property, and then also what other tax events might be going on for that taxpayer in particular. So there's just a lot of moving pieces, but they indicated that their expenditures range from about $4 to $8 million, and they did indicate that included territories in multiple states, of which Kansas makes up, that they would imagine in most years about half.
Committee, are there any questions? Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you. I think this is for the revisor to refresh my memory. I think during our discussion, did we state that a 1031 or 1033 exchange could defer these taxes if they so choose to do so during this process?
Yes, I believe there was some discussion over that, and you're right. I believe 1033 may have some application. Of course, that's a pretty complex area of the law that would take some pretty in-depth work to. I'm just as not familiar. That's a pretty particularized area of the law.
Okay, thank you. And just, I guess, a continuation of the meeting. I guess I appreciate the carry of the amendment narrowing down the scope. I think I'm still against it overall, just from the fact that, while I do think it negatively impacts some people, I don't want to maybe try and resolve the issue of, a handful while benefiting, maybe 100 others. It's just hard to know, maybe, is this really solving the issue or just kind of helping out a select few? And I think maybe there are some other taxable plays that they could do to mitigate some of these issues. So while I appreciate it being narrow in scope, I'm still against the bill in general. Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. This is I kind of support this bill because these people have been kind of rolled by the utilities, rolled by the state of Kansas now, or KDOT. They didn't even want to be involved with none of you. And this is kind of a rough way to treat somebody after they've been around here a long time. I think it would show a little good faith to pass this out.
Representative Turner, and then Epley. Or Epley, Representative Epley, did you want to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to try to respond, the 1033 exchange is fine for some people, has really negligible impact on this, so they would avoid the concept of this bill. This is to help those individuals that don't want to do an exchange. They've taken the income, and we've also put in this, and I didn't mention in the amendment, nor did anyone else. It's just federally adjusted gross income to the taxpayer, so it does take into account the basis points on the land, which is a factor. If you understand that, if you didn't pay much for the land and you sell it 20 years later through eminent domain, you're going to have a heck of a tax impact. We hope to take this concept to the federal government because we think it has merit if we pass it at the state level, but we got to start here first, folks. And really, to summarize this, these are folks that did not want to sell their land, that through the specter or the color of eminent domain are forced to sell their property. And I'm just advocating that we give them help with their state taxes on their federally adjusted gross income. And I don't see how that's going to hurt anyone. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I read about eminent domain, it says you can take a lump sum or you can take a stream, an annuitized payment. I guess this would apply regardless of which option they took. Second question is you're now applying it both to utilities as well as KDOT. So utilities, I guess that would be for like transmission line construction. So what are they, is the construction of the line actually pushing them out of their house, correct? We're not just talking about taking pieces of land to put towers, but they're actually pushed out of their home entirely, or pieces of land to put towers on their property?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. No, it's just anybody that has property taken through eminent domain, anyone, not necessarily being pushed out of their home. It could be most of these three individuals are individuals with farm property that they're still living in their home, but their property is taken so that no longer is able to be, it's not able to be used in the same way that it was.
And the taker of the property has to pay them fair market value according to eminent domain. Is that correct?
There's a lot of laws that dictate that. They can settle above and beyond that amount if they litigate it, but then they have to pay litigation fees. And some people don't. Some people want to take a lump sum payment, but others don't because they're concerned that the utility or the entity will not be around in a few years to make the payments. And that has certainly happened. And so that's why some folks take a lump sum payment, and then it becomes a big taxable event for 1 or 2 years.
Representative Helgerson.
Does this both apply to individuals and corporations?
Mr. Chair, yes, thank you. Representative, it applies basically to big corporations, public utilities, and the Kansas Department of Transportation only. It does not apply to cities or municipalities.
Okay.
That was taken out of the bill to make it a more focused bill, more narrow bill.
Let me a hypothetical. Road in Kellogg, which all of you have been on, took a great deal of property when they expanded Kellogg. Many properties went through eminent domain. So those individuals that went through eminent domain, that income that they made from the selling of their house or business, and the business could have been individually owned, that is off the tax rolls.
Once it's taken through eminent domain, it is off the tax rolls, yes. This bill would not apply to city and municipalities taking property through eminent domain. It's only utilities and public utilities.
I understand it, but the caution in this whole, and I had probably a dozen constituents or more that this would have applied to, and several corporations that the land was seized by, I think it was the Department of Transportation, that, has some amount of an impact. And I just want to warn the committee that there is some other than the individuals outside of the city and the county, even though it runs through the city and county, it could have been taken through eminent domain by the Department of Transportation, that you have a possible problem.
Representative Turner.
Thank you. So I'm back on my thoughts of, does it take the land out of use, or does eminent domain required in order just to get right of way? So they could still farm the land, let's say, but they have the right of way.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Epley.
There are various iterations, Representative. I mean, sometimes it takes it out of use for good. Other times it simply provides right of way. And then there's gradations in between where that right of way takes part of the property out of use, but not all of it. But you sell all of it because they have to have the line going over that. And it affects their ability to provide, for example, treating the crops the way they want to with flyover, spraying and so forth. So it has a real negative impact on production, of all their property, and they, and again, they didn't want to sell it.
Last question. Do other states, do we know what they do? We always talk about that when we consider things. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. That's an excellent question. This would be new case law. This is something that's not been done in any other state. This would be the first state to do it. It has precedent. We think it has precedent to go national because of the same concept.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think you're going to deal with a lot of large numbers of people. And the discussion's not what the use thereafter. The discussion is two things. One, they didn't want to be involved in the first place. And two, they got stuck in a time frame with a large sum of money that they don't want to give to the state for taxes. I think that's the bottom line there. So I'll be supporting the bill.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know Representative Epley, when we had this conversation earlier, you talked to me about some kind of gray area on eminent domain. I don't remember the term you used. And then, because, one of my original concerns was this encourages everybody to go eminent domain so that they can get out of the capital gains taxes on the state level. And so I had the understanding when we talked about it that this would apply to anybody, even if they, how do I want to put it, agreed on the sales price. But then when I read the actual bill, I'm just looking at line 19, number 1. It says an appraiser's award or final judgment pursuant to the Eminent Domain Procedure Act. And I guess one of the things I just need a little bit better understanding is, let's say I agree to sell my land, and I know in the back of my mind that if I don't agree to sell it for this price, they can take me to eminent domain. So I don't even go to the appraiser's award stage. So am I out the capital gains that way? Or is the appraiser's award something that happens behind the scenes that I never realize when I go into a private contract with, for instance, a school district?
I might defer to research on this because the term that was used was the color of eminent domain or the specter of eminent domain. Those are the words I used in our discussions, Representative. And my understanding is this bill will cover those individuals that settle as a result of the threat of eminent domain, but don't go to an actual eminent domain hearing.
So it covers if you sell under the threat. Basically, you go to an appraiser's, you have an independent appraiser set the value without going to the court. You accept the independent appraiser's deal rather than people that privately contract with them and never go to that step.
That's one step that can be certainly utilized. I don't know. I would ask Eddie as I read the bill, are there other methods that can be utilized or the revisor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, there's kind of two provisions under this bill under the amendment. If you look at it, there's one starting on line 19 and one starting on line 22. The line 19 is if it goes through the entire eminent domain act, and then essentially an award or final judgment is issued. Kind of picks up that. But then on the second one would be essentially as if they reach a private agreement or enter into a contract. So they don't actually go through the Eminent Domain Procedure Act. There's just a settlement between the parties for the agreed price of the land.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope that answers the question.
So I might ask staff, when they came up with the numbers from KDOT, then was that those numbers the entire amount of land that they purchased throughout the entire years, or were those only the amounts that they went to the award?
That's their entire spending level, both whether it went to a final award in an eminent domain case or if it would have been under the subsection 2 line here.
Representative Awerkamp.
He did a better job than I would, but Representative Francis already asked my question.
Further discussion, committee? Seeing none, Representative Epley, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of time, I'll close. Thank you.
Committee, you've heard the motion by Representative Epley to amend. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion carries. We are on the bill. Further discussion or amendments? Seeing none. Actually, Representative Burkamp, I think you were the original motion maker, so you can close and move your motion.
Do I have to? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the tax committee report out HB 2136 favorably for passage as amended.
And we had a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
The noes appear to have it. Division's been called. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And those opposed, please raise your hand. With 8 voting in favor and I believe 11 opposed, the motion fails. Is there any further business for the committee? This is our last meeting. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to commend you for all the great work you've done this year, especially on this tax load. I mean, it was definitely a haul. I'm just, in light of last week's basketball tournament, I'm just disappointed that I never got to pass out my deduction for gambling losses bill. But other than that, thank you, Mr. Chair.
How did you do on KU this year?
Well, there's a reason I wanted to pass that out, Mr. Chair. I tried to find somewhere in this mega tax bill, just couldn't do it. So.
Thank you for that. And committee, thank you again for all your hard work this year. We'll see you on the floor next week. We are adjourned.